The rain came down in sheets that Tuesday afternoon, turning the quiet country lane into a blurred watercolor painting. Through the downpour, a white delivery van moved slowly, too slowly, toward the iron gates of a private residence in Berkshire. Inside the security booth, David Chen watched the vehicle approach with the same steady gaze. He'd trained on thousands of deliveries before, but something felt wrong. David had been doing this job for 11 years. 11 years of watching cars come and go. 11 years of checking faces, scanning license plates, and trusting his gut. And right now, his gut was screaming. The van stopped at the gate. The driver stepped out, clipboard in hand, wearing a Royal Mail uniform that looked almost right. Almost. The color was a shade too bright. The logo sat a fraction too high on the chest. Details most people would miss. Details David never missed. "Delivery for Mrs. Middleton," the man called out, his voice muffled by the rain. David didn't move to open the gate. Instead, he leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Wait there, please. If you're watching this, make sure you subscribe. Stories like this don't come around every day. You won't want to miss what happens next." The driver smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He held up a medium-sized package, brown paper darkened by rainwater. "Just need a signature. Running behind schedule." David picked up his phone, pressed a button, and spoke quietly. "Control, this is Gate 1. I need a package verification." The driver's smile faded. "Mate, it's pouring out here. Can we make this quick?" "Won't be long," David replied, his tone polite but firm. Through the rain-streaked window of the booth, David studied every detail. The van's license plate was clean, too clean for a delivery vehicle that should have been on the road all day. The tires were new. The driver kept shifting his weight from foot to foot, eyes darting toward the camera mounted above the gate. "Control confirms no scheduled delivery for today." A voice crackled through David's earpiece. "Repeat, no delivery scheduled." David's heart rate picked up, but his face remained calm. This was the moment. The moment where everything could go wrong if he made the wrong choice. Turn away a legitimate delivery, and he'd face questions. Let in a threat, and the consequences would be unthinkable. "I'm going to need to see some identification," David said, standing up and moving to the door of the booth. The driver's jaw tightened. "I showed you my uniform. I've got a package. What more do you need?" "Company policy," David lied smoothly. "New security protocols. I'm sure you understand." For 3 long seconds, the two men stared at each other through the rain. The driver's hand moved toward his pocket, then stopped. His eyes flicked to the camera again, then to the road behind him, then back to David. And in that hesitation, David saw everything he needed to see. "Actually, let me call the main office," the driver said, his accent slipping slightly. "Sort this out." He turned back toward the van, movements just a bit too quick, a bit too tense. David's hand moved to the emergency button on his belt, fingers hovering over it, ready. The van's engine was still running, the windshield wipers still going. Everything looked normal, but nothing about this was normal. David watched the driver pull out a phone, turning slightly away, speaking in hushed tones. Through 11 years of this work, David had learned to read body language like other people read books. And this man's body was telling a story of growing panic. The rain drummed harder on the roof of the security booth. David's radio crackled to life again. "Backup en route. 2 minutes. Keep him talking." 2 minutes. David had to keep this situation calm for 2 minutes. "Everything all right?" David called out, stepping out of the booth with an umbrella, playing the part of the helpful security guard. The driver spun around, phone still pressed to his ear. Yeah, just... The office is checking the delivery address." David moved closer, slowly, casually. Close enough to see the details that mattered. The man's hands were shaking. Not from cold. From adrenaline. The package he'd set on the ground had no postal markings, no tracking number visible on the brown paper. Professional couriers always had tracking numbers. "Busy day for deliveries, I imagine," David said, keeping his tone light. "This weather must make it tough." "Yeah," the driver replied, eyes locked on David now. "Real tough. How many stops you got left?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "A few more? Maybe 5 or 6. David nodded, filing away the vague answer. A real courier would know exactly how many stops remained. They lived by their schedules, especially on days like this. "Where's your next delivery? Maybe I can give you directions." These country roads can be confusing. The driver's free hand clenched into a fist. "I've got GPS, of course," David smiled. "I just thought, look, is there a problem?" The driver's voice rose slightly. "Because I can just leave the package here, and you can sign for it." "Against company policy?" David said, his smile never wavering. "Has to be hand-delivered to the resident or their representative. I'm sure you know that." Behind the gates. In the main house, 200 meters up the tree-lined drive, Carole Middleton was having tea with a friend. Completely unaware of the scene unfolding at her front gate, the security system David represented was designed exactly for this purpose. To be invisible when everything was fine. To be a wall when it wasn't. The driver ended his phone call abruptly. He bent down to pick up the package, and David's muscles tensed. Everything slowed down. The rain seemed to hang in the air. The sound of the engine faded to a dull rumble. If the package was dangerous, this was the critical moment. The driver straightened up, package under his arm. "You know what? Wrong address. My mistake." "Really?" David kept his voice neutral. "What address were you looking for?" "Different Middleton," the driver said quickly. "Easy mistake. Common name. Wasn't a common name in this area. There was only one Middleton residence on this stretch of road. David knew it. The driver knew David knew it. "Let me help you find the right place," David offered, pulling out his own phone. Pretending to search for something. "What's the full address you need?" The driver was already moving toward the van. "I've got it sorted." "Sure I can't help? I know every house on this road. I'm good." The driver pulled open the van door. David's earpiece crackled. 30 seconds. "Actually," David said, his voice firmer now, "I'm going to need to see inside that package." The driver froze, 1 foot inside the van. "What? Security protocols?" "Any unverified delivery gets inspected before it leaves the property." "That's not legal." "You can't private property," David interrupted. "We absolutely can. So either you show me what's inside or we wait for the police to arrive and they'll do it." The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled tight. The driver's eyes went cold. The friendly courier mask dropped away completely, revealing something harder underneath. "The police," he said quietly. "Already called them." David lied. "Standard procedure for unverified deliveries." For a moment, David thought the man might run. His body language shifted, weight moving to the balls of his feet, muscles coiling. David's hand moved to his radio, ready to call for immediate assistance. Then sirens cut through the rain. The driver's head snapped toward the sound. Blue lights flickered through the rain-soaked trees, growing brighter. 2 unmarked vehicles were approaching fast, their sirens cutting through the afternoon like knives. David saw the calculation happen in the man's eyes. Fight, flight, or surrender. 3 options, each one leading to disaster for him. "Don't move," David said quietly. His voice carried authority now, the friendly security guard replaced by something more commanding. "Hands where I can see them." Driver's hands slowly rose, the package still clutched in his right hand. "This is a misunderstanding. I'm just doing my job." "Then you won't mind waiting to explain that to the officers." The first vehicle skidded to a stop 20 meters behind the van, doors already opening. 2 men in plainclothes stepped out, moving with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this 1,000 times before. One moved to the driver's side, the other circled around to block any escape route. "Armed police," the first officer announced, though his weapon remained holstered. "Put the package down slowly and step away from the vehicle." The rain seemed to intensify, as if nature itself wanted to wash away whatever was about to happen. David backed away, giving the officers room to work, but his eyes never left the driver. The man placed the package on the ground with exaggerated care. Too much care, as if it might break or explode. "It's behind your head." "Interlace your fingers." The driver complied, and within seconds, he was against the side of the van, being searched. David watched as they pulled items from his pockets. A phone, a wallet with multiple ID cards, a set of keys that looked wrong for a delivery van. The second officer approached the package, kneeling beside it in the rain. He pulled out a small device, scanning the brown paper wrapping. Everyone held their breath. "No explosives detected," he announced. "But there's electronics inside. Multiple components." David's chest tightened. Electronics. Not a bomb, but something else. Something that had required this level of planning, this level of deception. "Who sent you?" The first officer was asking the driver. Silence. "Who were you working for?" More silence. The officer searching the van called out, "No delivery manifests. No company documentation. Vehicles rental picked up yesterday in London under a false name." Third car arrived, this one carrying Detective Inspector Sarah Matthews, head of the local police security liaison. She stepped out into the rain, took one look at the scene, and walked directly to David. "Talk me through it," she said. David explained everything. The van's approach. The uniform that was almost right. The too clean license plate. The driver's nervous energy. The lack of delivery confirmation. Every detail he'd noticed, every instinct that had screamed danger. Matthews listened without interrupting, her face grave. When David finished, she nodded slowly. "You probably just prevented a significant security breach," she said. "We've been tracking an organized surveillance operation targeting high-profile residences. They deliver packages containing hidden cameras and listening devices. By the time the resident realizes what happened, they've already collected weeks of intelligence." David felt his stomach drop. Cameras recording everything. Every conversation, every visitor, every vulnerable moment. All for what? Blackmail? Stalking? Something worse? The package. He asked. Matthews walked over to where the officer was carefully opening the brown paper. Inside was a decorative picture frame, the kind you might give as a gift. Beautiful wood, professional craftsmanship. It looked completely innocent, except for the tiny lens embedded in the ornate corner carving, and the wireless transmitter hidden in the backing, and the memory card capable of storing months of footage. "State of the art," the officer muttered. "Motion activated. Would have started recording the moment someone hung it up." "How many deliveries did you say you've processed over the years?" "Thousands," David replied. "Maybe tens of thousands, and something made this one different." David thought about it. The rain had started to ease, leaving behind a world washed clean, but somehow darker. It wasn't one thing, he finally said. It was everything together. The timing, the body language, the details that were almost right but not quite. You do this job long enough, you learn to see the patterns that don't fit. Matthews pulled out her phone, making a call that David couldn't hear. When she finished, she looked at him with something like respect. "Mrs. Middleton's been informed. She wants to speak with you." David blinked. "That's not necessary. I was just doing my job. Nevertheless." Matthews gestured toward the gate. "Shall we?" The drive up to the main house felt longer than its actual 200 meters. David had been working this gate for 11 years and had never once been past it. That was the job. You stayed at the perimeter. You were the invisible line between the world and the people you protected. Now, it was crossing that line. The house appeared through the clearing trees. A beautiful Georgian manor that somehow managed to feel both grand and welcoming. Carole Middleton stood at the entrance, and despite everything David had heard about her composure, he could see the tension in her shoulders. "Mr. Chen," she said as he approached, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, steady. "Detective Matthews tells me I owe you a considerable debt." "I was doing my job, ma'am. You were doing far more than that." She gestured inside. "Please, come in. I think we should talk about what happened." Inside, the house was warm, filled with the kind of comfortable elegance that came from years of living, not decorating for show. Family photos lined the hallway. David tried not to look too closely, aware he was seeing a side of life that was meant to remain private. They sat in a small drawing room. Tea appeared, brought by a housekeeper who gave David a grateful smile. Carole poured with hands that barely trembled. Detective Matthews explained what was in that package. She began, "A camera. Recording equipment. Yes, ma'am. For weeks, potentially. Recording my family, my grandchildren, my private conversations." She set down the teapot carefully. "Do you have children, Mr. Chen?" "A daughter. She's 8. Carole nodded. "Then you understand. The idea that someone could have been watching, recording, invading our lives that way." She paused, collecting herself. "It's violating." David wanted to say something comforting, but what could he say? She was right. It was violating. It was an invasion that would have gone unnoticed until the damage was done. "How did you know?" she asked. "What made you suspicious?" David thought back to those first moments, the van approaching in the rain. "Little things," he said. The uniform was wrong. Not obviously wrong, but wrong enough. The van was too clean. The driver was nervous in a way that didn't match someone just trying to make a delivery in bad weather. But thousands of people make deliveries. How many have you waved through because everything seemed fine? Thousands, David admitted. And maybe some of them weren't fine. Maybe I missed things. But today, everything came together in a pattern I couldn't ignore. Carole studied him for a long moment. "Detective Matthews said they've arrested 3 people so far. The driver and 2 others who were waiting nearby to retrieve the data once the camera was installed. They believe it's part of a larger network targeting multiple families." David felt a chill. "Targeting families like yours." "Yes." She set down her cup. "Which brings me to why I wanted to speak with you." The detective inspector recommended a security review, a complete overhaul of our protocols. She suggested we bring in specialists, people who understand these evolving threats. That's wise. She also suggested we start by consulting with the people who already understand our security needs. The people who've been protecting us, sometimes without us even knowing it. Carole leaned forward slightly. "Would you be willing to be part of that review, Mr. Chen? To help us understand where we're vulnerable." David hadn't expected this. "I'm just a gate guard, ma'am. There are people far more qualified. You're the person who spotted a threat that would have compromised my family's safety for months, possibly longer. You're the person who trusted his instincts when it would have been easier to just open the gate and move on. That's not just anything." The weight of her words settled over him. David thought about his daughter, about the princess who was Carole's granddaughter, about all the children who deserve to grow up without hidden cameras watching their every move. "I'd be honored to help," he said quietly. Carole smiled, genuine warmth breaking through the tension. "Thank you. Now there's someone else who wants to meet you." Before David could ask who, his phone buzzed. A message from Detective Matthews. "Need you back at the gate. The suspect is talking." David stood. "I'm sorry, I have to go," Carole said, standing as well. "We'll talk more soon." "But Mr. Chen, thank you. Truly." As David walked back down the drive, the rain had stopped completely. The world smelled clean, fresh, like something dark had been washed away. But he knew better. This wasn't over. If there was a network, if other families were being targeted, then today was just the beginning. Back at the gate, the scene had transformed. What had been a tense confrontation in the rain was now a full investigation. Police vehicles lined the road. Technicians were photographing the van from every angle. The package sat in an evidence bag. Already tagged and documented, Detective Matthews stood by her car, phone pressed to her ear. But she waved David over when she saw him. "He's talking," she said, ending her call. "The driver. Real name is Marcus Webb. He's part of a group that's been operating for at least 2 years, maybe longer. They target high-profile families, celebrities, politicians, anyone whose private information could be valuable." "Valuable to who?" Matthews's expression darkened. "Tabloids? Blackmailers? Foreign intelligence services? Whoever's willing to pay." Webb says they've successfully planted devices in at least 15 locations. 15 families who have no idea they're being watched. The number hit David like a physical blow. 15 families. Hundreds of people. Children growing up under surveillance they couldn't see. "Can you find them all?" David asked. "The devices. We're working on it. Webb is cooperating, giving us addresses. But some of the devices have already been removed, the footage sold or traded. We may never know the full extent of what was compromised. David looked at the van, at the fake Courier uniform now bagged as evidence, at all the careful planning that had gone into this operation. Why Mrs. Middleton? Why today? Webb won't say who gave the orders or why specific targets were chosen. But my guess, someone wanted access to her conversations, her contacts, her family's movements. Information like that is worth a fortune to the right buyer. Or the wrong buyer, David thought. In the wrong hands, that kind of intelligence could put lives at risk. A young officer approached with a tablet. "Ma'am, you need to see this." Matthews took the device, her face growing more serious as she scrolled through whatever was displayed. David waited, watching her expression shift from concern to anger. "They were planning to come back," she said finally. Webb just admitted there was a second phase. Once the camera was installed and recording, they were going to send another courier in 2 weeks with a follow-up package. Something that would give them remote access to the home's Wi-Fi network. Oh. David felt sick. It wasn't just surveillance. It was a complete infiltration. Everything connected to that network would have been vulnerable. Computers, phones, security systems, the very tools meant to protect the family would have been turned against them if you hadn't stopped him today. Matthews didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. The implications hung in the air between them. One moment of David waving the van through, one decision to trust the uniform and the clipboard and the friendly smile, and the entire operation would have succeeded. Mrs. Middleton would have hung up the picture frame, charmed by the gift. The camera would have started recording. 2 weeks later, the network would have been compromised, and no one would have known until it was far too late. "We need people like you," Matthews said suddenly. "People who can spot the details that don't fit. The police academy teaches procedures, but they can't teach instinct. They can't teach 11 years of watching and learning and understanding patterns." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we're building a task force. Specialized security for higher-risk targets. We need experienced personnel who understand how these operations work, who can recognize threats before they materialize." She looked at him directly. "I'm saying I want you on that team." David had spent 11 years in a security booth, 11 years of quiet vigilance, of routine, of being the person no one noticed unless something went wrong. The idea of stepping into something larger, something more active, felt both terrifying and necessary. "Can I think about it?" "Of course, but think quickly. Every day we wait is another day these networks are operating, another family being targeted." Matthews handed him a card with her direct number. "Call me when you're ready." As the sun began to set, painting the wet road in shades of gold and amber, the investigation continued around David. He thought about his daughter, safe at home with his wife. Unaware that her father had just prevented something that could have affected one of the most watched families in Britain, he thought about the 15 other families, the ones who hadn't been as lucky, the ones who might still have cameras watching them recording their private moments, their vulnerabilities, their secrets, and he thought about Carole Middleton's question, "How did you know?" The truth was, he'd almost not known. There had been a moment right when the van first appeared when he'd almost dismissed the feeling, almost convinced himself he was being paranoid, almost opened the gate. That moment was the difference between safety and violation, between privacy and exposure, between a family living their life and a family becoming someone else's commodity. That moment was why this work mattered. 3 weeks later, David sat in a briefing room at the Metropolitan Police Headquarters in London. Around him were 12 other security professionals, each one chosen for their unique skills and experience. Former military, ex-intelligence officers, technology specialists, and David, the gate guard who had trusted his gut. Detective Matthews stood at the front of the room, screen behind her displaying photos of recovered surveillance devices. Picture frames, smoke detectors, wall clocks, phone chargers, ordinary objects transformed into invasive tools. Thanks to Mr. Chen's intervention, Matthews said, We've dismantled a network that had been operating undetected for 3 years. We've recovered 23 devices, identified 47 targets. It arrested 12 individuals involved in the operation. But not everyone, David thought. The investigation had revealed that the network was larger than anyone had initially suspected. International connections, sophisticated technology, buyers in multiple countries. They'd cut off one branch, but the tree still had roots. However, Matthews continued, this is just one network. Our intelligence suggests there are others, which is why this task force exists. To stay ahead of these threats, to identify them before they succeed. After the briefing, as David gathered his materials, a woman approached him. Late 50s, sharp eyes, the bearing of someone who'd spent time in positions of authority. Mr. Chen, I'm Victoria Harper. I was head of security for the royal household for 15 years. Detective Matthews told me what happened at the Middleton residence. David shook her hand. I did what anyone would have done. That's where you're wrong, Victoria said gently. Most people would have opened that gate. I've reviewed the training protocols for private security firms across the country. What you did, recognizing that combination of small discrepancies and acting on them, that's not standard training. That's experience and instinct working together. I just got lucky. Luck is being prepared when opportunity presents itself. You were prepared. She pulled out a folder, handing it to him. This is an analysis of security vulnerabilities at high-profile residences. I'd value your input. Sometimes the people who've been doing the daily work see things that consultants and experts miss. David opened the folder, scanning pages of protocols, diagrams, risk assessments. It was overwhelming and fascinating in equal measure. I'm not sure I'm qualified. You stopped a surveillance operation that could have compromised national security? Victoria interrupted. You're more than qualified. You're essential. That evening, David returned home to find his daughter waiting at the door. A drawing in her hands. Mommy said you're a hero, she announced, showing him a picture of a stick figure standing in front of a gate, a giant shield in his hands. David's throat tightened. He knelt down, looking at the drawing at his daughter's proud smile. I'm not a hero, sweetheart. I just pay attention. It's what heroes do, his wife said from the doorway. They pay attention when it matters most. Later, after his daughter was asleep, David stood at the window of their small flat, looking out at the London skyline. Somewhere out there were families who didn't know they were being watched, children who were being recorded without consent, privacy being stolen one hidden camera at a time. He thought about Detective Matthews' offer, about Victoria Harper's folder, still sitting on his kitchen table, about Carole Middleton's gratitude and the weight of knowing he'd prevented something terrible. For 11 years, he'd been content to be invisible, to be the quiet guardian at the gate, noticed only when something went wrong. But maybe that wasn't enough anymore. Maybe the world needed people who were willing to step forward, to use their experience and instincts not just to guard one gate, but to protect many. His phone buzzed. A message from Matthews. Task force meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Hope to see you there. David looked at the message for a long moment. Then he typed a reply, I'll be there. 'Cause somewhere in Britain, maybe right now, another fake courier was approaching another gate. Another surveillance device was being prepared for installation. Another family's privacy was about to be violated, and someone needed to be paying attention. Someone needed to see the uniform that was almost right but not quite. The van that was too clean. The nervous energy that didn't match the situation. Someone needed to be willing to trust their gut. When everything logical said to just open the gate, David had spent 11 years learning to be that someone. And now, maybe he could teach others to see what he saw, to recognize the patterns that didn't fit, to be the invisible line between safety and violation. The next morning, he would start that work. But tonight, he allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction. One family was safe because he'd been paying attention. One operation had been dismantled because he'd trusted his instincts. In a world of hidden cameras and sophisticated surveillance, sometimes the best defense was still a human being who cared enough to notice the details. Sometimes the best security system was simply someone who refused to look away. David turned from the window. checked that his daughter was sleeping soundly, and went to prepare for tomorrow. The work was just beginning, but for the first time in 11 years, it felt like he was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do, paying attention when it mattered most.